Hello and welcome to Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk. My name is Sven Langenfeld. I'm the Azure Stack HCI Commercial Sales Specialist at Microsoft. And today I have three wonderful colleagues with me, Shireen, Ian, and Barbara. Welcome to the show. So,
Hi. Okay.
what topic are we presenting today? I'm super curious about today's topic because, to be honest, I never heard about that. I think it's a brand new solution, and I'm super curious what you are presenting today to our partners and customers.
So today we're going to be presenting about like Azure Stack observability. And what observability is, it's not a term that's specific just to Azure Stack HCI, but in the market, like basically observability is the ability to collect data and to infer it so that we can provide support. So today what we're presenting is not necessarily anything that's new. It's been in the market on the available on the product for over a year easily, but we have
Mhm.
made a lot of great investments in it that, for example, with in our telemetry and our diagnostics and then remote support. So that's what we want to talk about today with the customers and audience.
Perfect. Forward to it. So, Shireen, you're starting, correct?
Yes. So basically, just to, yeah, as I mentioned, today our talk will be focused on Azure Stack HCI observability. And I'll be talking about what is new, and basically after that, Barbara and Ian will go further more into the topics.
And for the audience, if you have any questions, so don't hesitate and ask your questions in the chat, and we try to answer them immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I just wanted to do a brief introduction. So my name is Shireen Isab. I'm a senior program manager on the Azure Stack HCI team. My focus has been more so in observability and supportability. And I've been on the team for over like 2 years, but I've worked on Edge products for over 5 years.
My name is Barbara Rodriguez, software engineer 2 on Azure Stack HCI team, focus on diagnostics, and I've been with the team for 3 years.
My name is Tian Bui. I'm also a software engineer too on Azure Stack HCI team. My main focus is on remote support feature, and I've been with the team for almost 3 years.
So today what we will be covering is I'll give you an overview and then of the whole end-to-end solution. Then we'll kind of deep dive into the elements of Azure Stack HCI observability. Then I will talk about the extension installation because that's sort of how you can take advantage of what we have. And then, sorry about that. Then Barbara will go into diagnostics and like Ian will go into remote support, and then there'll be some demo. And the last slide, we have some resources that you can go through. So basically, how the over Azure Stack HCI overview works is when you decide that you want to purchase Azure Stack HCI, what will happen is first when you deploy it, as part of that, an observability agent gets installed. And once the cluster node is, once the agent is installed, it's able to connect to the cloud. That's when the data that, on-prem data, which is the on-premise data, which comprises of diagnostics, telemetry, metrics, all of that data gets generated and gets sent. Initially, it is sent to Geneva. Geneva is an analytics engine that Microsoft uses. Basically, it's able to do mass scale ingestion, storage, correlation, and analysis. So that's what the engine that we're using for ingesting the data. Once we ingest the data, where it is stored, it's stored in Azure Data Explorer. And basically, we support all the regions where an Azure Stack HCI service is deployed. So, for example, we are GDPR compliant. We are EU Schrems compliant. So, if you are a customer who is in Europe and only wants to keep their data in Europe, that's something we can completely do. In our public docs, we have the list of regions that we support today, and all the data is handled in accordance with the Microsoft data handling policies. And I will talk a little bit further more about how the data is collected and when it is deleted. In terms of visualization, we won't go into it today, but there are some resources online. Basically, you can also view the data with the metric data that's collected as part of observability, can be viewed in Azure Monitor, and basically that's not something we will go into today, but it is available. And but for us, what we will be showing is basically how we are using that data for analysis and mitigation. Basically, Azure Support Center is an internal tooling that's used by Microsoft Support. They're using that. So once the data is collected, our Microsoft Support, they're able to view that data in Azure Support Center. Or like, and for example, I haven't listed here, but we have some log analytic dashboards. So the data that's collected from your environment, we are using it to either make product improvements or to provide support to you.
Mhm.
So when we think about Azure Stack HCI observability, today we're going to be focusing on diagnostics, telemetry, and remote support. There is a fourth element of monitoring, which we have not really included in this presentation, but there is information online, and hopefully maybe in the future we can have another session about that, because that would be a whole nother hour to go through. So we're collecting two types of data, which is the telemetry data, which is a continual flow of data, which means we're constantly collecting it. It's retained for up to 2 years, because and it's always retained within the U.S. But the data is completely scrubbed. It has no personally identifiable data. So it's very, we're collecting system data, very generic, basic data that we're using for understanding, either for our KPIs or key performance indicators, or for providing basic support. Then the second type of data that we are more so using, that we need more details and where we're able to provide support, is the diagnostic data. That's like a episodic or on-demand flow of data. So we're not continually collecting it. It's either something that is triggered by you, the customer, when you need to provide us data, or if there is a failure that's detected, we proactively collect data. And the data is stored based on the customer deployment region. So as I mentioned, we are always GDPR compliant and EU compliant. So based on where the customer deployment region is, that's where the diagnostic data will be stored. And it is always deleted within 29 days. If there is an open case and and the data is required longer for analysis, the data may be kept a little longer, but otherwise it is deleted within 29 days. um, there is remote support. Remote support is not necessarily like a type of data collection. It is more so about permitting access to the device to perform limited actions or repairs. And as part of that, maybe log collection can be triggered. Hian will give more details about remote support, but all I will say is this is what it is about. So it's not necessarily, there's no it's basically a mechanism which customers can use so that they can allow Microsoft to remotely get access to their device to perform limited commands. And so that's what the remote support is about. And we have all more information available in the public documentation, like what are the data types, how to collect the data, locate the data, how to send the data. So at the end, we have a slide which lists all of our public documents and where you can get more details. So next is, I will just briefly talk about Azure managed extensions, because that's the way how you are able to take advantage of observability. So once you've successfully, you have purchased an Azure Stack HCI, you've successfully deployed it, and now you've registered it with Azure. There are Azure managed extensions which are automatically getting installed on your cluster. And these extensions are essential for the functionality and quality of the system. And so both of the extensions that you see, which are the Azure Edge Telemetry and Diagnostic extension and Azure Edge Remote Support extension, so these two also get automatically installed. And the reason why that they are going through this path is because we absolutely need observability for supporting the product. So that's why we have these extensions. So as you can see on your right, if you go to the, if you will, once you basically have registered your device, and if you go into settings, into extensions, that's where you would see the two extensions. And once you have the extensions, there is no maintenance required. What we just want to show is that as part of the, when as part of the deployment process, each extension will get downloaded on every node. And for the telemetry and diagnostic extension, that is what will then start enabling the ability to emit data, and that's when the data will then get consumed by us, so that Microsoft can either see the data in Azure Support Center, or see it in log analytic dashboards. With the remote support extension, that too gets installed on every node. That's what this remote support is, a feature that's not relatively new. It's been there for over a year. In the previous version of remote support, you would have to download the remote support agent on every node, but now with the extension, you're no longer required to do that. And once the extension is there, what this allows is it gives the ability for customers to grant access to Microsoft to get to get access to your device. So we're able to perform a limited set of actions. So that's what the purpose of remote support is. Hian will give a lot more details about remote support, but just to let you know, it's extremely safe and secure, and it's built to make your life easier, so that we don't, because right now with an on-prem device, we need to be available with you on call to do any kind of troubleshooting. But with remote support, we can, that's not the case anymore. And so that's basically the two extensions. There are more information available in the public documentation about these extensions. They're available on the 22H2 and 23H2 build, and obviously they'll be available in the future builds too. So next, I will give it to Barbara to speak about.
Okay, perfect. But before we switch to Barbara, I would like to bring a question up on the screen. It does not have to do with our today's topic. It's about the question, when will we bring Stretch Cluster back to Azure Stack HCI in the version 23H2? And as Cosmos Darwin mentioned in his blog post during the Ignite session, of course, Stretch Cluster will come back, but it will take some more time. So please stay a little bit patient. What I would like to invite you is to follow me on Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk on LinkedIn. Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk, easy to find. There I will post everything that's relevant and new about Azure Stack HCI every single day, so you do not miss anything. Or there's another opportunity for you to stay up to date. I have a website created for Azure Stack HCI because there's so much content and so many links and knowledge all across the world on countless sources. And I bring everything together on one website. So for example, if you go to the individual support, you can find information about Fast Track for Azure, or about our today's topic. So you can watch the video on demand, or you can go to the documentation. And there is a folder called News. On this news folder, you can see everything that's new. So at the moment when Stretch Cluster will be back, you can find it on that website as well. And I will bring up that URL for you if you want to have it and you want to bookmark it. So that's the moment when we bring Barbara to on top of the screen, and I share her deck. And I say thank you so far, Shireen, and welcome, Barbara.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give a diagnostics overview. So first, what is diagnostic data? This is data that used to diagnose product issues. And how does Microsoft access the data? As Shireen mentioned, data is accessed via Azure Data Explorer web app. and access is restricted to Microsoft personnel and is only used for support and product improvements. As Shereen mentioned, diagnostic data is stored for 29 days, and if the case is taking longer and data needs to be retained, there's a way to do that. So what diagnostic data is currently collected? So first we have role logs. A role is a specific set of logs that's either used by a team or related to the same product area. So examples of roles are bare metal, ECE, deployment logs, etc. The public documentation lists all the roles and a description for each role. And we have some roles that are always collected. So the first is observability logman traces. And that's used by the observability team to diagnose any issues with the log collection. The other role that's always collected is test observability, and that's used by the observability team to diagnose any issues with the telemetry and diagnostics extension. And then we're planning to have deployment logs also be a role that's always collected in April of this year, and that would be to diagnose deployment issues. So just keep in mind that even if you do a log collection specifically for just a bare metal role, you will see observability logman traces and test observability data also get collected. So then what else is collected is SDC logs. So that's software-defined data center logs. And these logs are generated by the get SDC diagnostic info commandlet. So when this is triggered, it'll collect cluster logs, get netview logs, etc. All right, now to collect diagnostic data, we have the send diagnostic data commandlet, and it has a few commonly used parameters. The first is filter by role. So you can either filter by one role with a string or multiple roles with a string array. So if you only need data for a specific role, like for example, if you're trying to collect logs related to a deployment issue, perhaps you only need deployment logs, bare metal, and ECE role. So if you only need a specific subset of logs, we recommend using filter by role, because then the log collection will be faster and the data will be uploaded to Azure Data Explorer sooner. If you leave filter by role blank, if you don't use this parameter, the default is to collect for all roles. Okay, the next commonly used parameter is collect SDC. The default, if you don't specify this parameter, is true, which means that when you run send diagnostic data, it'll also run get SDC diagnostic info and then collect those cluster logs, get netview logs, etc. that we discussed. So if you do not need this data, we recommend setting this parameter to false. Yeah. The next commonly used parameters are from date and to date. So for example, let's say I can set from date to today 4 p.m. and to date to today 6 p.m. So what that means is that when collecting role logs, for each folder on the environment where send diagnostic data is checking for logs, it'll only collect and upload logs that were either created or modified within this time range. So if you don't specify these, the default from date is 1 hour ago, and the default to date is the current time. So you get a time range of 1 hour. If your environment is not in UTC time zone, please use your local time zone when putting in from date and to date. Then the next commonly used parameter is supplementary logs. So as we discussed, when you run send diagnostic data, you get all the role logs, and if you specified collect SDC true, or if you didn't specify at all, as I mentioned, the default is true. So those are the logs you get. But let's say you want additional log. Let's say you also put some data in a folder called like temp folder, my logs, and you want this to be collected as well. Then you would include this supplementary logs parameter and then put in the path to that folder. So that'll collect all the role logs, the SDC logs, and also these logs that you put in the temp folder. Okay, now to discuss the parameter sets for send diagnostic data in more detail. The default parameter set is called log collection and parsing. And so this will collect logs and ingest to Azure Data Explorer. And this runs on all nodes. So what I mean by that is if let's say you have a cluster with 4 nodes and you run send diagnostic data on node 1. It'll distribute the log collection request to node 2, node 3, node 4. And then node 2, node 3, node 4 will each collect all the logs on their own node and then upload these logs to Azure Data Explorer. And so if you just run send diagnostic data, then this is the default parameter set. And then you can, the default parameter set takes the 4 commonly used parameters that we discussed. Okay, so the next parameter set is called save to path, and this will collect logs and save them to a share or an output path. This is generally used when you don't have connectivity. So you want to save the logs to a share, and then later when you have connectivity, upload them to Azure Data Explorer. And there's more detail on this in the public documentation. So this parameter set runs on one node. So if you run send diagnostic data on node 1, it'll only collect the logs from that node. So if you need logs from 2, 3, and 4, then you have to specifically run send diagnostic data with save to path parameter on each node where you need logs. So an example is send diagnostic data dash save to path. And then if you're saving to an output path or you already mapped the share path, you don't need the share credential parameter. But if you're saving the logs to an unmapped share path, then you do need the share credential parameter. And this parameter set takes the 4 commonly used parameters that we discussed. So in the next parameter set is no log collection. So this will parse logs from a path and ingest to Azure Data Explorer. Similar to save to path, this runs on one node. And so you would use this if, let's say, you only need very specific logs. You don't need all the role logs or the SDC logs. So for example, if in an ICM, the investigator says, like, please send logs from just a CMAS logs folder, then you could do send diagnostic data dash supplementary logs, then put in the path, so CMAS logs dash no log collection. So that dash no log collection switch shows that you don't want the role logs, you don't want the SDC logs, you just want to upload data from one specific folder. So this does not take filter by role or collect SEC or from date and to date parameters, because those are specific to log collection. In the sense we're not running the log collection, we're just uploading data from a specific folder, then those parameters don't get used. And then the supplementary logs parameter is required because that's indicating the path to the folder that you want to upload. So now we can look at the bottom of the screen where we have an example of running send diagnostic data. So in this example, I ran send diagnostic data, filter by role, observability logman traces, collect SDC false. So then after you run send diagnostic data, you'll get some output on the screen. It says, so from date parameter not specified, setting to default value, March 7, 2024, 1851. So I ran this log collection on March 7, 2024, 1951. So it's set the default from date to be 1 hour ago. Now it says 2-day parameter not specified, setting to default value of March 7, 2024, 1951. Again, because I didn't set the 2-day, it's setting to default value, which is the current time. So now converting from date and 2-day to UTC. So from date and UTC is now March 7, 2024, 1851. 2-day and UTC is now March 7, 2024, 1951. So because this environment was already in UTC, there wasn't any actual change. But if you put the from day and 2-day, pass in your local time zone, you'll see it gets converted to UTC. So correlation ID is this correlation ID. This is used to query for this log collection in the diagnostic pipeline. Provide the below information to the customer support engineer working on your case, AEO region. So that's used because there's a different cluster for each region. So the ICM investigator will need to know which cluster to look in Azure Data Explorer for the data. Then AEO device ARM resource URI. So that's unique to this specific environment and would be used in queries once the data is uploaded to Azure Data Explorer. Then AEO cluster node ARC resource URI. So that's specific to this node. So generally when querying for the data, the investigator will use AEO device ARM resource URI when all the nodes are connected to a cluster. But if the nodes are not connected to a cluster, they would use AEO cluster node ARC resource URI. And then we have the correlation ID, which is unique to this specific log collection. So that's used frequently in queries. Okay, observability agent is running. This log collection will attempt to collect logs from all hosts. So because I didn't specify save to path or -no log collection, it's using the default parameter set, which, as I mentioned, runs on all nodes. And then successfully submit an on-demand log collection ID, this ID. This is used to track the log collection with get log collection history. So get log collection history is also a command that you could run to see all the logs that were collected. And each log collection that shows up on the screen will have a specific ID associated with it. And then, yeah, there's more information about all the parameters that you can use in the parameter sets in the public documentation. All right, so now I'm going to give an example. Well, I'll just share this slide. So I'm going to do a demo to show how to use filter by role, collect SEC, from date and to date, supplementary logs, save to path, and no log collection. No, sorry. All right. So filter by role. So I type in send diagnostic data first. So first I created a session to one of the nodes where I want to run log collection. So filter by role. So as I mentioned, you can do one role like this, or if you want to do multiple roles. So that's how you do multiple roles. I'm not going to click enter to run these log collections because it does take a little while. So now let's say we want to collect the SEC parameter. If you do want to collect SEC logs, you don't really need to specify true because that's what the default is, but you can if you want. But if you don't want to collect them, definitely include send diagnostic data -collect SEC false. So then from date and to date, so let's say, for example, I want log collections between the current time and 2 hours ago. So in my environment, it's March 27th, 4:27 p.m. So I'll set from date to be 2 hours ago. Okay, so now we can see from date is March 27th, 2:27 p.m. And now I'll just set to date to the current time. So now we can see to date is March 27th, 4:27 p.m. So if I wanted to collect all logs, including collect SC for this time range, I would put in from date this variable, and then to date that variable. Then supplementary logs. So let's say I have a folder. I'll say folder equals join path. Okay, so let's say I have logs there, and then I can see, just check if this folder exists. Okay, so then it doesn't exist, so I'll just create it. Okay, so now let's say if I want to collect all roll logs and SDC logs, and I also want to collect the logs I saved in this folder, then I would do supplementary logs, and then the variable for this folder path. So now I can combine these 4 commonly used parameters. So let's say I only want the bare metal rule again, and I don't want SDC logs, and I want that 2-hour time range that I discussed before, and I want these supplementary logs at this folder I created. Okay, you can't really see that. So let me. Okay, so this would be the bare metal role, no SEC logs for that time range. Let's say I want the default time range, but I also want supplementary logs. Then I can do this. Okay, so then the next parameter set is save to path. So I can say, let's say I'm saving to just some output path on the environment because I just want to see I just want to look at the raw logs. I don't want to upload them. So I can create a folder. See logs, then check if this folder exists. Okay, it doesn't exist, so I'll create this folder. Okay, so now if I wanted to save logs to this folder, I could do save to path, then my folder. And then because this is just an output path on this environment, I don't need to include a share credential parameter. And then this would save them. So it would save it in the C logs folder on node 3. Now I can pretend that I have a mapped share path. So I can say share path equals. So this IP address of this environment I'm using, let's say it's called share. Then I can do save to path to the share path. If it wasn't mapped, then I'll pass in the share credential parameter. So I would set the share credential parameter using get credential. And then I won't type it in, but then you put in my username and password. Okay. So then in that case, actually, okay, so then in that case, I would have something like, and then I would store the data in that share credential variable. And then you can use save to path. As I mentioned, you can use save to path with the commonly used parameter. So I want to save it to this folder, and then it was my share, I think, actually. Okay, sorry, this was a share path. So then in that case, let's say I had a share credential. I would save it to this share path, and then I would use this share credential variable. Okay, and you can use a save to path parameter set with the commonly used parameters we discussed. So let's say I only want the EC role, I can do that. If I don't want SDC logs, I can do that. I can specify the time range. So specify the time range. And then let's say I had supplementary logs at some path. I don't know, see my logs. I could do that. Okay, and then the last parameter set is no log collection. So let's say on node 3, I have I just want the logs in CMS logs. I can do send diagnostic data, supplementary logs, CMS logs, no log collection. So it won't collect the row logs. It won't collect the SDC logs. It'll just go to this folder and collect this data. All right, so that's the end of the demo showing how to use the send diagnostic data parameters. I'll pass it on to Hien to discuss remote support. All right. Yep. So next, Hien is going to discuss remote support.
So we bring Hien on top of the stage. Welcome, Hien, and thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara and Sven. So as Shireen mentioned before, remote support is a feature that allows customer support engineer to access customer device remotely and perform a limited set of troubleshooting operations. These operations are specifically a list of allowed commandlets that we associate with each access level that the engineer get. There's two main access level, diagnostics and diagnostics repair, each with its own set of allowed commandlets. The commandlets in the diagnostics level have the ability to query the state of the machine, whereas the commandlets in the diagnostics repair level is a superset of commandlets in the diagnostics level. That means it can query the state of the machine, but it can also change the state of the machine. And the full list of allowed commandlets is available in the public documentation that we'll share at the end of the presentation. And the remote support feature is going to be provided primarily through the remote support ARC extension that is going to be available for 22H2 and 23H2 customer, and will be available for 24H2 as well. And so what are the benefits of using remote support? The main benefit is that it improves the speed of troubleshooting, as Microsoft support engineers no longer need to arrange a meeting with a customer to access their stamp, as this can be quite difficult if the customer is in a different time zone, for example. And this will definitely speed up like troubleshooting, because now, as long as the customer has grant access to their machine, the engineer can connect at any time before that access consent expires. And it's also free. Remote support is included by default with an HCI machine that is ARC enabled. Another important thing to note is that remote support is safe and secure because access is granted by the customer on an incident-by-incident basis, and the customer can define access level and duration for when access will expire. And at any point, the customer can revoke consent, revoke access, and which will immediately terminate any remote session that the support engineer is connected to. And the full transcript of what operations has the engineer performed during that remote session will be available to the customer on their own machine. So what are the scenarios in which you would find yourself that remote support is helpful? The full list of scenarios can be found in the public doc. And I'll just, for example, I'll just go through like two examples. The first one is a log collection. So the commandlets that Barbara has mentioned in the previous session, send diagnostic data, it's also an allowed commandlet for the CSS engineer. That means the customer no longer needs to find out what kind of role, what kind of parameter they need to provide to collect the necessary logs for the CSS engineer. Instead, the support engineer can run that commandlet themselves once they have access to the remote session. Another example where remote support is helpful is when the engineer wants to find more information about the stamp. Instead of asking the customer, they can run like commandlets in the remote session to find that out themselves. So now I'll do a quick demo of what the remote support flow would look like. There's two main scenarios. The first is the pre-registration scenario, meaning that the machine is not registered to Azure. And the machine is not registered to HCI. So in this flow, the first step is that the customer support engineer will generate an insight in ASC. So ASC is our internal tooling to deal with customer tickets. And this insight will contain a SAS string to establish the remote session to the customer machine. And the engineer will share this SAS string with the customer, which brings us to the second step. With the SAS string, the customer can run enable remote support commandlet on their machine that they want to grant access to. And after the customer has granted machine on that machine on their has granted access to their machine using the SAS string, we come to the third step. That is the customer support engineer can now use the remote support link in ASC, our internal tool, to start the remote session and perform troubleshooting actions. I've prepared a quick demo of what that looks like. So this is the first step. The requester, meaning the customer support engineer, will go to our ASC portal, and first they'll generate a solution set. And because this is a pre-registration flow, there's no resource name. They'll select resource not applicable, and once that goes through, we'll be able to see. So this is we're seeing a remote support insight. Let me pause the video. These are the steps that the engineer must perform to get JIT access in order to have access to the remote session link. This will provide extra security. And the white blob that I've blurred out here is the SAS string. This SAS string is expired already, but I'm just blurring it out to be safe. And this SAS string is what they're going to give to the customer. And this link, the bottom, is the link to the remote session that once the CSS engineer have access to, they can perform troubleshooting operations on customer machine. So we move on to the second step of the flow. That is, now that the engineer has shared the SAS string with the customer can now run enable remote support on their machine. And what that looks like is you can run enable remote support and specify what access level you're giving. This case, I'm giving the first level diagnostics. And the SAS credential is what you can use the SAS string that the engineer has provided to you. And so just checking that access was granted, I'm running get remote support access, and I can see the access is active and connected. So we come to the third step of the flow. That is, the engineer can now enter the remote session to customer machine to perform troubleshooting. It will take a few minutes for a session to be established. So in the meantime, I'll quickly go through the public documentation to describe what commandlets are allowed in the session. So this is the first access level. As you can see, there are a bunch of commandlets from different modules. For the second access level, diagnostics and repair, currently we only have 2 repair commandlets, but we'll continue to add more commandlets to this level to make it more robust as we get more feedback. So I'm just going to speed forward so you can see what the terminal looks like. Once the terminal has finally, oh, my apologies. once the terminal has finally loaded, the engineer can now see a full list of what commandlets they can perform on the machine. Okay. So that was pre-registration scenario. Now I'm going to cover post-registration scenario. In post-registration scenario, meaning that the machine is registered with Azure, what that looks like is first, customer will run enable remote support commandlet on their machine, and they don't need the SAS string for this. And secondly, the customer will share the resource URI of their stamp with customer support engineer, and the engineer will use this URI. This can be, for the customer, this can be obtained through multiple ways, one of which is running get Azure Stack HCI commandlet. And once they've shared this with the support engineer, the engineer can use this to create an insight in our ASC portal that you've seen in the previous demo, and to get a remote support insight generated for that specific machine. And the third step is, once the insight is available, the support engineer will be able to use the remote support link generated in ASC portal to start the remote troubleshooting session. And I've prepared a quick video of what that looks like. So this is the first step of the flow. We're currently on customer point of view. They're granting enable remote support on their machine with access level as diagnostics and repair. I'll quickly cover what this parameter means. So this is a parameter that means you've read the consent text for granting remote support access for the machine already. So providing this skips that whole pop-up. But if you don't provide this parameter, there will be some text that explains what consent you're granting to, and you just have to say yes or no to accept. And just to check that access is granted, I run get remote support access, and I can see that access is active and connected. So now we come to the second step of the flow. This is the support engineer point of view. They're using our internal tooling, and they're going to put the resource name that the customer has shared with them. This is the cluster name. And I'll skip to when the engineer has found the exact cluster name. And once the remote support insight is generated for them, they'll also perform these set of actions to get JIT access to the remote session. And as you can see here, there are 4 different links, and that is because in this case, the customer stamp is a 4-node cluster, and I've only shown me granting access on one of the node, but on that stamp, I've granted access on all 4 of the nodes, which is why we're seeing 4 different access links. But the customer can also just grant access on one of the node, and you'll only see 1 link for that cluster. So now I'm assuming that the engineer has performed all these actions to get JIT access, and engineer can now open one of the links and to connect to the remote session. And after a few minutes, once that is established, they can start running the list of allowed cmdlets for that access level. So that was the end of the remote support demo, and also the end of our presentation. These are the list of resources. Since we cannot share links in the live stream, these are the titles of the public documentation that we've mentioned in this presentation. There's a lot of information on there, so feel free to check that out. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Perfect. So thank you all that you spend your time together with the Azure HCI Tech Talk community. So if you have any questions later after that session, so you can raise your questions anytime, contact me, and if you do not know how to reach me, I will my website where you can find all my contact data back on screen. So thanks a lot, Jan, Barbara, Green, for your time and your awesome presentation. And hopefully see you soon on Azure Tech HCI. Take care.